Grand Duchess of Goodwill, the Mademoiselle of Maximalism, heiress of heirloom. We, of course, are talking about Emily Adams Bode and her namesake brand, Bode. It's become a quick favorite to many Hollywood superstars and your favorite fashion micro-influencers. But what is it about Bode that has caused it to have such a meteoric rise since its start in 2016? They won a CFDA award for Emerging Designer of the Year in 2020. They were the first women-led brand to show at New York Fashion Week Men's, and they have over 70 stockists globally. So today we will be exploring what makes Bode so special. Emily grew up in Atlanta, Georgia, and spent many of her summers in New England, where she acquired her love of clothes and textiles from her mother and aunts, who were avid collectors themselves. She took an interest in clothes at a young age and began sketching and drawing things with hopes of one day becoming a fashion designer. In high school, she began making clothes for herself and discovered a love for boyish styles in men's athletic wear and workwear. This ultimately led her to pursue a degree at PARSONS School of Design in menswear. In college, Emily would intern at storied American brands like Marc Jacobs and Ralph Lauren, whose influence can still be seen in her collections today. After graduating from Parsons in 2012, there isn't really a lot of info about what she did other than some freelance work, but the story goes, in 2016, a New York Times writer approached her after finding her Instagram and asked if she was working on some sort of brand. Emily did a quick build a business speed run, wrote a business plan, got some samples together, and within a couple months, she had an interview in the New York Times and was ready to go and launch Bode. The genius of Bode lies in their ability to curate and reinterpret forgotten textiles into contemporary menswear. It's not really a new idea, but it's only something that Bode has really been able to execute on. And they're able to do this because they've built this extensive archive of quilts, tablecloths, drapery, and all sorts of other domestic textiles through a network of vintage dealers that Emily has built over the last few years. And ultimately, this has given the brand exclusive access to scarce and unique textiles that they're able to then adapt into their seasonal collections. For certain brands, this may be seen as simply a gimmick for differentiation, but with Emily Adams Bode, you know it's sincere because she's an avid collector herself. She deeply cares about both the craftsmanship and the stories behind the textiles. It's what excites her the most and makes the brand really interesting. In several interviews, she talks about the sweaters she's received from both her mother and her grandmother being some of the fondest things she has because of the stories behind them, this feeling that she gets of nostalgia when she wears them. And in many ways, Bode is kind of a brand of Emily trying to extend that sentimentality of these family heirlooms, the feeling that you get, and extend that through her designs to others to feel the same way. While Bode doesn't deviate too far in terms of silhouette and design from traditional menswear, the origin of the textiles does give the brand an overall interesting perspective. Many of the textiles used are from the 20s, 30s, and 40s, and they're domestic textiles, meaning they were used by women around the home. And this was a time period when the home was kind of an extension or an expression of the woman who occupied it. This is why you'll see a softer color palette from Bode and a lot of florals and other things that are a little bit traditionally feminine, but then applied to a more masculine silhouette with Emily's feminine touch to it. And it makes kind of an interesting presentation overall without pushing the wearer too far outside of their comfort zone. From the textiles and seasonal themes to the brand values and silhouettes, Bode is definitively an Americana brand. It's like the quirky, eclectic brother of Ralph Lauren who went to art school. Stick with me on this. Look at this lookbook photo and tell me that if you had a pure white button-up shirt instead of this kind of wacky fabric and just brown khakis instead of these patterned pants, tell me that could not be in a Ralph Lauren diffusion line. Tell me it couldn't be. Bode is definitively Americana just as much as a Ralph Lauren, Marc Jacobs, and many of the former greats have been. This shirt has over 15,000 hand-sewn beads on it, made in India, and yes, I counted, and it weighs over a pound. It feels like you're wearing chainmail armor in RuneScape, ready to slash down any noobs that haven't subscribed to your channel yet. New videos every Sunday at 8 a.m. Pacific Standard Time. You should definitely subscribe. And overall, it's just a beautiful shirt that I don't wear quite as much as I should because I don't know. I feel like I don't do it justice most of the time when I wear it, but that's the thing about Bode. There's this idea that you have to really wear the clothes. You can't treat them as precious because by wearing them, you learn a little bit about yourself, you learn about the history of it, and you really learn about what you do and don't like. I think scarcity is one of the things that has really fueled Bode's growth. If you think about it, a lot of the shirts are one of a kind or one of few, meaning very few people in the world will have access to these. So what you do have ends up feeling very precious and personal to you overall. And I think that kind of FOMO feeling really helps accelerate people's desire to buy things, and ultimately just creates more and more hype around the brand. I think the relatability of the clothes is another huge factor. You know, a lot of these fabrics remind you of something that your mother, your grandmother, great-grandmother, whoever it was, may have had growing up, and it creates this feeling of nostalgia and these, fond memories that you attach to the clothes. And it really just kind of helps you create a connection with them, which you might not with other designers. And lastly, I think one of the things they've done really well is just seizing opportunity, taking risk and betting on themselves. Whether it's starting the brand kind of on a whim, to showing at New York Fashion Week when you're still such a young brand, to opening a store when once again you're only a few years old. They've taken a lot of calculated risks that have ultimately paid off and helped the brand grow without taking on any sort of external investment. And it's really something that I think a lot of designers should take to heart. You have to really believe in yourself and know when it's time to go big. And that will conclude today's video. Thanks for watching, thanks for subscribing and liking, and I'll see you all next week, Sunday at 8 a.m.